we've all, I think, collectively spent a ton of time looking for fraud. I haven't found a single instance of fraud. I mean, I've been on a mission. I've captured data from all the major platforms globally and zero. Now, there will be fraud, I'm sure of it, but you know, Zach hit the nail on the head. The reason there hasn't been fraud, it is incredibly difficult to fraud somebody when you're in a completely transparent environment. You know, if I'm sitting up here and I'm telling you all I'm raising $500,000 for an electric car, imagine clicking on my LinkedIn profile, seeing I don't have an engineering background, and immediately asking a question. And if any one of you asks a question, I have to answer. If one of you is an accountant and you ask about my margins, I have to answer. If one of you is a lawyer and asks about the legalities, I have to answer. And so you're seeing that transparency. It really is, you know, sunlight really is the best disinfectant. Another thing is a lot of people, I think, have the idea that the crowd will sort of indiscriminately throw money at startups, and that hasn't been the case, at least not abroad. They've been actually quite discerning. So the success rates on more open marketplaces. So some marketplaces are heavily curated. They're accepting fewer than 5% of applications. Funders Club, for example, in the US is more exclusive than Harvard. Very exclusive. They've funded 100% of their deals. But that's because they're largely coming out of Y Combinator, Techstars, and they're heavily pre-vetted. Other marketplaces are more open. One in the UK is GrabQ, where they accept around 60% of applications because they want the crowd to do the due diligence. Right now, their success rate is between 5 and 10%. So it varies, but it's still quite low. The crowd is very discerning. They're not just throwing money at the screen.
And I think the one thing that we haven't touched upon is that when an entrepreneur is going out to raise money, even though the threshold for Title III is up to the $1 million cap, the SEC is very bright in understanding that if you go out and raise $1 million and you only raise $500,000, $1 million, well, they put a cap here to say if you don't raise what you're asking for, the entrepreneur can take none of the investment. So it sort of forces the entrepreneur to think about their financials. It forces them to think about how much money they really need to get the business going. It forces them to think about who is in their social capital purview so that as they're going out seeking money, that they can actually raise the amount of money that they're seeking. If they don't raise that target amount, they don't get any of the money.
Is that true in Title II as well, or is there a minimum?
No, in Title II is really operating the exact same way private placement offerings are regulated today. It's the exact same process, with the exception you can now do general solicitation and general advertising. So everything else remains the same when you're doing a private offering.
So if you request $500K, you will get $350.
You can actually get the money, absolutely.
So long as it's written as a mini-max deal and you go over the
Usually there's a minimum of that.
Question, in the history of early stage investing, about 50, 70, 90% of companies disappear. And the history might be the same going forward. So you end up having a situation that, 3,000 deals come out, 10,000, 50,000 investors have lost their money, 5,000 have paid 20 times on them whatever it is. One of the big concerns about the process is the legal profession destroy the process. Because a lot of groups of people get together and go back. I don't know any single early stage business that I've been involved in a lot of that don't change their plans as they did in New York. So the concept of saying we're doing exactly what they say, that's not going to work in a business. They're going to have to modify and change. As customers say, we use red, not blue. And so I think that is there any insight that you have about how the system doesn't get destroyed by, legal profession looking at this as a major opportunity to get funds to educate their kids in college?
jump real quickly. Sorry. What we've done historically is we put a provision on the use of proceeds that says facts and circumstances may change. We're asking for you.
I can't.
They're in private placement memorandum today, you may often say, typically it's a tech deal where you may actually need to pivot for any one of a number of reasons. You'll put a provision in the document that says, we're seeking your approval in advance that facts and circumstances may change, and therefore we want to be able to pivot. I think that's good disclosure. In Title III environment, you could do that, I think it's inadequate. You're going to have an online capability in real time to go back to people and say, facts and circumstances have changed. We'd like to seek your permission to change course and still get to use the money. Now, not everybody's going to agree with me on that, but I think you have a real-time ability to reach out to folks and get their approval before you pivot. And Title II doesn't have, you don't have to necessarily do it through a funding platform, so it's not going to be as easy to do that, or you can do it through emails. I think it's wise to go back to your investors, let them know what's happening all the way, which is what I was saying before, because you also, if your opportunity fails, as you say statistically, it may be more likely than not will, and nobody on this panel is shying from the reality that people will lose money. Regulators understand that people are going to lose money in a Title II and Title III environment. That's what investing is. Unless we're going to shut down the public markets because of MF Global and RevCo and all these things, I just don't buy that you can't allow this to all take place because there's some level of contained risk. So my answer to you is that I think it's good business practice to go back to folks before you pivot, unless you've laid it out in advance.
And I think that just one more thing on your one more point of your question or observation, small businesses failing. So why do small businesses fail? Oftentimes they don't have enough capital to sustain themselves. So with crowdfunding, if you raise $200,000 and that takes you for 3 months, you can actually go back to the trough and try to raise another $200,000 or $300,000. So you can raise up to $1 million using crowdfunding or Title III. So the entrepreneur has a longer, roadway in actually trying to get the business to stay up longer. That's number one. Number two, by allowing the opportunity for the crowd to actually see what you're doing in your business, oftentimes you actually get support from the crowd. So they're vetting your product. They're saying, well, maybe we shouldn't really do the red shirt because the kids actually like blue. They give you some feedback in terms of intelligence on how you can develop your company in such a way so that it can be successful. Today, when most entrepreneurs are creating businesses, they're working in a garage or they're working out of a very small framework and they have no support to actually help them to be successful. That's by financial support, product development support, technology support. And so this framework that's been created through crowdfunding actually gives you this full ecosystem and support of your business becoming more well-established.
All right, I think that's a perfect segue to start talking about Title III. We've kind of thrown it in there, mentioned it a little bit, and maybe back to you, Doug. I know this is the infamous question that we all ask, but when is Title III coming? Any insight?
I'd also like to point out how adroitly I stepped aside from this condemnation of the legal profession. By the way, I'm out here every single day because I do recognize that as a legitimate concern of the profession. I'm not a big fan of either Title II or Title III. Title II more than Title III. I think they've got it backwards. The timing, we have all worked, and now I'll say something nice about the people at the staff at the SEC. The people at the staff have been extraordinarily accommodating. We've had at least 10 meetings with the SEC, many meetings with FINRA, and the staff folks understand that this is congressionally mandated and the president has signed it into law. They have worked dutifully with us in Title III, unlike Title II, which is a paragraph provision that just says lift the ban on general solicitation. Title III is a framework for a new way of going forward, and there are a lot of legal implications to other provisions in the securities laws that are in Title II as well, but more so in Title III. And Kim and CIFRA have written letters upon letters giving well thought out positions on how we think Title III should proceed. Having said that, in my view, it's not defensible that the proposed rules are not out, other than, and one can talk about that there's Dodd-Frank provisions that still haven't been done. They managed to get Title II done after a lot of pushing. I believe that the rules were written a long time ago, but there's a thought process or an interagency concern about Title III, and the public advocates have not gotten past their belief that unaccredited investors should not be exposed to this asset class. I don't agree with that. The legislation passed, the collective will is that it should proceed, but they are still fighting the battle behind the scenes, and therefore the agency is caught in a bit of a tough spot, and so we don't have the proposed rules out for that reason. I cynically, as I was talking to Kim and Johnny before, think they want to see what happens with Title II. The sophisticated answer is it's anybody's guess. I think when you actually go through the timeline of from the time the proposed rules come out, which is hopefully this fall, it's still months and months, maybe as much as 9 months away before those rules, after they're written and commented upon, would ever allow Title III to proceed. So it's troubling from my point of view. The good news, however, is markets don't sit idly by. I think it's embarrassing that Johnny can say casually that crowdfunding exists in the UK, Australia, the Netherlands, and we believe that we somehow are being much more responsible in the way we're conducting ourselves and preventing and not permitting it. Particularly when, what's happening? Various states have taken the opportunity to say, okay, fine, it's not going to happen at the federal level, we're going to do it at the state level. Well, that's ironic to me, that there are a series of states that either are conducting crowdfunding only within the confines of their state because they're pro-business and they only want local investors to support local businesses. But that activity and that movement is pushing into new states like North Carolina and Wisconsin. And we're going to wake up by the time crowdfunding is legal at the federal level, and there'll be many states that have already allowed interstate crowdfunding to be conducted. So the answer is I'm in disbelief where we're not further along. I hope that we see it next year.
Okay, great. And let's fast forward 9 months then and say this is all up and running. Let's talk about, because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the room. I was talking to some of them before the event started. Let's talk about what are the max amount of money they can raise, and as an investor, based on my income status or my income level, how much can I invest into a potential deal over a specific period of time?
So under Title III, you can, as an investor, you can raise up to, so if you're a non-accredited investor, let's start. A non-accredited investor is any person who earns less than $200,000 a year as a single individual, less than $300,000 as a couple. And you also don't have a net worth of $1 million minus the value of your primary home. That's the unaccredited definition of an investor. So say that's what you are. You can only invest up to 5% of your income and or $2,500 if you earn less than $100,000 per year. If you earn more than $100,000 a year, you can actually invest up to 10% of your income. So that's the unaccredited investor. If you are an accredited investor under Title III, you can invest up to 10% of your income, not exceeding $100,000 per year. That's pretty much it.
Doug, is there any further understanding about under Title III, if there's both accredited and non-accredited investors, how much a company can potentially raise?
That's where it gets complicated, so obviously that was the softball question. We have argued to the SEC that the definition of investor is not defined in Title III, and therefore what they were referring to unaccredited investors, as Kim appropriately pointed out. And therefore, if you're conducting a crowdfunding campaign in a funding portal, all of the accredited money that comes in addition to the non-accredited, should be excluded from the $1 million cap. So you got to consider it a hybrid, simultaneous Reg B 506 offering with a crowdfunding component, or it could all just be permissible under Title III. But then again, what we're arguing is that accredited investors should be able to come in addition to the unaccredited and raise more than that $1 million. And just before I forget it, I can just digress for 1 second. I want to commend again Zach and Jason and Woody, because this is another. It's just odd to me that we are so frustrated with what's not progressing here as it relates to Title III. But worldwide crowdfund capital advisors is being embraced State Department and the White House are actively working with Zach and Jason Woody, Sherwood, sorry, to go worldwide and open up crowdfunding in all these different countries, Italy, France recently, and throughout Asia, and we're kind of caught in a quagmire here. It's just double standard.
And Johnny, question for you. You've done a lot of research, ton of research on different platforms and portals across the world, really. As an investor, say I'm never invested in a private company before, considered an unaccredited investor. What do I look for, in terms of different platforms or potentially different deals?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is there's an incredible diversity of deal flow that's going to be presented to you. So if it's early stage, I mean, one of the platforms in the UK, they're allowing investors, non-accredited and accredited, to invest as little as 10 pounds. It's $16 to start. And that's insane in a great way. So that allows you to build a diversified portfolio of the riskiest assets for under $500. And it gives you exposure to an asset class that empirically has performed quite well. But it's not just about startups. For a lot of investors, they're not going to want to invest in potentially the next Facebook. That may not be for them. However, they very much will have an affinity with the restaurant down the street. I grew up in Ohio. We all know those businesses where we know the owners. They've been in our community. Imagine they need to raise $100,000 and they offer an 8% note. Banks are pulling out. It's very difficult for them to find debt financing, especially if they don't have assets that they can lend, that they can borrow against. As someone who lives in that community, would I accept an 8% interest? Absolutely. If I can invest $100, absolutely. I'm getting 10 basis points in my checking account, 3% over 10 years in the treasury, hopefully, probably not be inflation. I had the opportunity to invest in a business that I know and that I trust. And to me, that's what I'm personally really excited about, because those opportunities, it's defined, the return is defined, you're going to see cash inflows coming in. It's not de-risked entirely, but it is lower risk. And then you have the social sort of influences that are promoting that marketplace. And then let's say you want to invest in emerging growth companies. So today the average investor is really pretty much boxed out of private equity. Unless you're a high net worth individual who has access to private equity funds, it's not an asset class that's open to you. Which is unfair because it's a great asset class. So now you can invest in a diversified portfolio of consumer product companies or oil and gas or real estate. There's a lot of real estate platforms lining up, offering fixed rate returns and offering access to real estate markets for investors for the first time. Whether you're in New Jersey, Ohio, or California, you can build diversified portfolios very efficiently.
And on the flip side of that, as an entrepreneur, what do I look for in terms of a platform?
Yeah, so some platforms are vertically focused, so they're going after niches. So belabored Circle Up, because it's one of the few with traction today, they only focus on consumer products and retail. And what they've done is they're not just a funding platform. It's more about an ecosystem. So the second you apply to them, they surround you with resources that are directly relevant to your industry. So for example, part of their due diligence process is they partnered with a company in Cincinnati called NBC Test. And they send out consumer products all across the US and do a consumer product testing. That test would cost $50K, which wouldn't be affordable for startups. But Circle Up has negotiated a partnership with them to offer it cost effectively, and actually they require it for all the companies that apply. They also created partnerships with General Mills as well as Procter & Gamble. So now if they're funded on Circle Up, you have direct access to potential strategic buyers, with direct access to potential distribution, which is incredibly valuable. So if you're a startup in early stage technology, look for platforms who potentially can offer you more than just funding but resources. Look for platforms who are going to surround you. The second you get to the platform, here's legal support, here's accounting support. Today the fundraising process is incredibly fragmented. It's really challenging, especially for first-time entrepreneurs who don't have experience with financial services. They just get bombarded. You go to meetups and it's just really confusing, sort of diffusing the noise. So now you go to a platform and they're going to hold your hand and say, okay, here's what you need to do, check mark, check mark, check mark. And so I think looking for platforms that offer those periphery services is the best way to go.
Platforms regulated?
Yes, they are. They will be regulated by FINRA and the SEC.
Okay.
They're not regulated yet because the final rules have not been established, but once that's been established, they will be some mandate
Title III, not Title II.
Gentlemen over here, you were talking about basically like a debt platform in New York, et cetera. You actually gave an example of a debt platform, 80% note. Are there debt platforms being created here as well as equity investment type platforms?
Absolutely, yeah, especially on Title II. I mean, so Title III, there's a lot of uncertainty around what that will look like. But in Title II, there are a number of people, especially in real estate. So there's 6 or 7 platforms that are offering debt instruments. There are others going after, there's one going after farmland to offer interest-backed note on farmland. So we're seeing a lot of granularity. Pick any industry, really, pick any asset class, and you're going to see crowdfunding, because crowdfunding at its core is just a more efficient capital formation mechanism.
I'm getting back to something what you said before we were in Title II, but really related to Title III. You have to answer every question. Is that every question of your investors or every question of people going in? Because if your campaign goes viral, you'll never get your business off the ground. That's one of those questions.
Yeah, so on Title III, you don't have to answer, but if you deflect a question that is, your margins look really high and you don't answer, or you don't have something in your deck that you can point to, it appears like you're dodging people, that's going to be suspect.
No, I get like, shut
Yeah.
up, but I mean, you get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, on Title III, what you're seeing is, so I actually track the number of questions that are being asked. You typically see fewer than 20.
But it's not a requirement of the platform.
No, it's not a requirement. Another thing is a lot of the platforms have built in on Title II, this goes back to how you protect information. You don't show everything to everyone right at the get-go. And actually, this is the ultimate empowerment of the entrepreneur. Because now, today it's, you reach out to a select few people and you're confined to that network. Now you can advertise to everyone, solicit interest to an investor who may have industry domain expertise in Washington. And if he applies to look at your deal, you can accept him. And you can say, I only want these 50 people to see the deal. Now that's assuming that you have that demand. But it really is empowering the entrepreneur.
What are the reporting requirements of a company funding crowdfunding? Either 2 or 3. I mean, there's this thing that they need 10Ks, they have to talk to their stockholders annually. What is it response kind of thing, or what are the reporting requirements for the people who funded the crowdfunding?
Under Title III, the only mandate to date is that you have to do an annual statement per year. That's it. You don't have to hold a shareholders meeting. You don't have to do a quarterly report. It's just an annual statement. Funding portals want to carve out sort of a nice niche for themselves. They're encouraging the issuers to actually start doing quarterly filings, depending on the type of companies that are coming to market. It may make sense for them to do monthly filings, in terms of sharing that information with the investors. But it is really a mandate of just one statement per year.
Well, what is in that statement? What kinds of, is that financials? Is it marketing? Is it, what is it? What's in there? Does it go back to the business plan? What is required? I'm trying to understand what a company has to do to even maintain a program that's funded with crowdfunding. Do they need an accountant to do this? What are they?
As of right now, the annual statement, it's just, the wording is annual statement. It has not been defined specifically what has to be disclosed in the annual statement per by the issuer.
And that's Title II. Title II, there's far more purview to the platform. What you're seeing a lot of platforms, they want to support that. And that's a value-added service they can offer. So after the transaction closes, a lot of the platforms are charging a fee post-funding to basically manage all investor relations, which is phenomenal. I mean, baked into the system, imagine having an API where you fill in information and it outputs a quarterly report that automatically goes to investors. And platforms, they want to maintain this balance where as a company, I want to be able to reach out to my distributed network of investors. That's one of the huge value added of crowdfunding. But I don't want investors calling me every day. They need to run the business. So maintaining a mechanism that says, you have a request, you can post in this private form. And investors know that, this is key, and all platforms are going to do this, is delineating expectations. Because investors are fine, they know what they're getting into, and they expect a quarterly report or a biannual report. It's where you don't delineate expectations where you tend to have more problems. So platforms are going to be pretty aggressive there in managing that for both the business and, of course, also maintaining the trust of the investors.
Question about aftermarket. Are there rules about aftermarket transactions in 2 and 3? I raise money, crowdfunding site,
period, so you have to hold your shares for 12 months. What we'll
No,
see.
I'm talking about the entrepreneur, the rules about what they can do about raising additional funds. Maybe at a lower price than the initial price.
Oh, you mean if they can go out and raise more capital after their first round? Yeah, they can raise up to, how it's written right now is they can raise up to $1 million in every 12-month period. So every 12 months they can go back and raise more capital through crowdfunding.
And so if they want to raise outside of $1 million, then they could go into a 506C offering, or 506B, depending on how much they want to raise.